Honestly, I don't know where to start with this one. There's no planned intro for this. I don't even know where to begin. I was willing to give Balan Wonderworld a fair shake, so here it is. Okay, let me level with you guys for a second. When I decided to make this video, I had every intention of writing a somewhat neat and tidy script like I normally would so that I could get my thoughts out concisely, albeit maybe slightly scattered. That's just how I do, I guess. I never have an outline for my writing, and I typically just sit down at my keyboard and start typing away. And it's basically why I don't refer to my videos as reviews necessarily, more like free-form essays on my experience with games. And I never usually have much of a problem just sitting down and letting the words flow. This game, however, has broken me, apparently. I can't even begin to think of how I can ever approach a script for this, as this game's design seems to be more scattered than my thoughts usually are. Because of this, I'm gonna try to just go even more freeform than I normally do and talk about this unscripted. I've taken some notes down here and there, but overall, I can't seem to find a way to structure a proper script. But perhaps maybe in this context, it'll be more of an authentic representation of my experience. Let's begin. Also, if you continue watching the video and find yourself liking it, consider subscribing because it actually does help a lot. That's it. Now onto the video. So I'm not going to go super in depth about the history of this game. All you really need to know is that Yuji Naka, basically the father of Sonic, was behind this game, and it was published, shockingly, by Square Enix. Personally, I had no real expectations for its quality, but it at least had a bit of pedigree, so that gave it some merit. What actually came out is, well, it's something. So the game is a 3D platformer. You have to collect MacGuffins just like you would in Mario or Banjo to progress in the game. So it is a collectathon, but unlike your typical collectathons, this one's stages are linear. So instead of having a big open sandbox with multiple collectibles to be found throughout, you have one long stage that is progressed through linearly with different collectibles along the way. Now, in most stages, it's really not hard to go back and collect stuff that you've missed, but because the levels are designed in a linear fashion, it does feel kind of cumbersome and weird to backtrack and pick up stuff that you passed by. Now, the game does expect you to backtrack, but more so in the sense of restarting an old stage and going back from the beginning with a new power as opposed to backtracking in a stage you're already in. But I'll get to the power situation in a little bit. First, let's at least talk about its presentation. I'm genuinely so confused. Now, in terms of character design, I think Balan looks cool. He reminds me of Knights, obviously, and that's fine. But the player characters are ugly as sin. I don't know how to really describe it, but they basically just look like your run-of-the-mill budget human character 3D models, the kind of thing you'd see in a random Pixar ripoff movie you'd find at a supermarket. And the main boy player character looks like Chuck Thorndike from Sonic X. Like, don't get me wrong, I can definitely see the Dreamcast-era 3D Sonic influence, but it looks more like shovelware Steam game or $5 eShop title Dreamcast-era 3D Sonic influence. Like, it really doesn't even look like Balan himself was designed by the same people who designed all the human characters. It's weird. The art direction in concept isn't bad. The cutscenes are actually impressive. They're all animated well, and the music is good too. Actually, for the most part, the music in the entire game as a whole is relatively good, or at least decent. But the drop in quality from the cutscenes to the actual game itself is staggering. The actual game looks multiple generations behind, and also a lot of the color choices are just strange or jarring. A lot of the levels feature way too many colors in their palette, with the saturation turned all the way up to the point where it's overwhelming. And some of the levels even do this weird warped perspective thing where it's like you're inside a sphere, kind of like the inverse of what Sonic 3's special stages do, if I had to compare it to something. And I get motion sickness, so that was fun. Overall, I think the game is pretty ugly. And there are a few moments where they get it right, like stage 2 is actually really pretty in my opinion. But as you'll see, much like the entire game as a whole, for every hit, there's like 100 misses. It's bizarre. As for the actual animation in game, the movement looks like it's straight out of SA1. And while I didn't personally have a problem with how the game controlled, it does feel a bit stiff and dated. Not sure if that was by design, but I can see how that might not jive with new players. The camera seems to often have a mind of its own, and it never seemed to give me enough field of view. In my experience, it's always just a bit too low. And the only other thing I can say about the controls is, well, the only other thing you can control. Every button on the controller is either jump or whatever the action is for whatever power you currently have. The totality of this game's controls are a control stick for movement, a control stick for the camera, and one button that does everything else. And then that button is remapped to every other button on the controller. Have fun. This even extends to the menus as well. Every single button is accept, and if you wanted to go to the previous menu, you have to select it. You can't just press B or whatever. This is a one-button game, and a lot of the powers actually don't even let you jump, if you can believe that. Most of them do, but a good amount of them just have one action that you do on the ground, and then there's no option for jump, so if you want to jump, you need to switch to a different power. You know, I keep needing to bring up these powers. So I guess let's rip the band-aid off and talk about the powers. So this game has a bunch of powers that you need to use to progress. They are almost always situational, you only ever use most of them once, and a lot of them do the same thing. And to top it all off, there's roughly 50,000 of them. Like I said before, the game's a collectathon, and the game's main collectible are these Balan statues. They're basically like stars or jiggies. There's a good amount hidden in past stages that you can't access the first time through, and sometimes you need to go back through old stages with newer power-ups to access them. To do this, you have to have at least one of the required power-ups in your inventory that's necessary to access whichever statue you're currently after. To get a power-up into your inventory, you have to collect more power-ups than you can hold, which is 3. Once you've collected too many, the last one on the screen gets transferred to your inventory, which, by the way, the game never actually tells you how to access. Turns out you need to stand completely still on any checkpoint for about 5,000 years until it decides to spawn. Once in the inventory, you can choose which power-ups you want to either take out or put away, and there's a tally for however many you currently have, as getting hit just one time makes you lose whatever power-up you're wearing. So even if you may have unlocked a certain power-up in a stage that you realize you may need for backtracking, you might still need to go into a stage, collect a power-up, leave, and then go back to the other stage just to collect the statue that requires you to have whatever power-up that is. I will say that it is very possible in some cases to either sequence break or exploit the physics to grab statues without the technically required power-ups, but that's not always the case. When it was possible, though, it's probably the most fun I had with the game. There's also one statue in each stage that's obtained through what's called Balan's Bouts. Somewhere in each stage, you'll find a golden Balan hat, and approaching it spawns Balan, who then takes you to a minigame. This is a glorified QuickTime event. You press the button at the right time, or occasionally rapidly press the button in 4 phases during each bout. Timing all of them perfectly earns you a Balan statue, but if you miss any of them or get anything other than a perfect score, you either need to come back to the stage later or die because the hat despawns and you can't try the minigame again. Cool. Now, the level design itself isn't the worst. It's fine for the most part. It's passable. I don't have much to complain about. I can't say it's bad, really. It's nothing to write home about, and it's pretty inoffensive. It's mainly how you interact with the level design that's the problem. See, going into this video, this is the subject that I felt like I was going to have the most trouble conveying. Like I said before, there's about 1 million power-ups. The vast majority of them are context sensitive. You reach a point in a level where you can't progress, and you need to pick up whatever power is right in your vicinity to move forward. This could be an arbitrary obstacle or a simple puzzle that requires the use of an ability to solve. 9 times out of 10, the game will use whatever mechanic it just threw at you one time, or at most a few times, and then drop it like it never existed. And a lot of these power-ups are very similar to each other as well. The game introduces all these new mechanics every 5 seconds and then throws most of them away immediately. Some are even slightly enjoyable to use, and others are box fox. And like I mentioned before, a lot of these power-ups don't let you jump, which is a main mechanic in this game that's required to traverse much of the game's level design. So you often will need to swap costumes and wait for the animation to play out just to jump onto the tiniest platform. They take away your jump, but then don't alter the level layout to make it not cumbersome. Like if you're going to require me to use a costume that doesn't allow me to jump, then maybe you should change the level layout so that I don't have to, instead of needing to switch back and forth between costumes just so I can jump over a stick. Like yes, you can easily switch costumes on the fly with the bumpers, but you have to watch the animation every single time, and doing that over and over again gets very irritating. Anyway, the game basically threw 10 billion things at a wall trying to see what would stick, and despite a handful of them having the potential to, they threw so much clutter into this game that even the slightest bit of quality is outshined by the other countless bad design choices. It's like a double album with 30 songs on it, but only 3 of them are good. Only, unlike an album, you can't just play the good parts. I'm not going to be the one that's like, this game is a broken mess and it's the worst thing I've ever played in my life. Because genuinely, the game, for the most part, is not a broken mess. There are plenty of buggy spots in it, but it's not completely broken. This isn't Sonic 06 Part 2. The biggest problem with this game is that it's not fun, and it just doesn't know what it's trying to do or what it's trying to be. It knows it wants to be a 3D collectathon platformer, but in terms of what's actually in it, it is ADHD the game. Actually, let me touch on that and get deep for a second. As someone with ADHD, we often have a ton of really creative ideas that we'd think would be awesome, but then in practice, usually never take the time to work on them or flesh any of them out, and then those ideas either die or stay floating around in our head. This game is like taking all of those ideas ideas, not fleshing any of them out, but putting them all into your video game anyway. A lot of the ideas are bad, but quite a few of them seem like they actually have a lot of potential. Unfortunately, because none of it is ever fleshed out or given enough time to shine, what ended up being made is a glorified doodle pad trying to pass itself off as a cohesive piece of art, and then sold for $60. QA often gets a lot of unwarranted flack for a game being bug-riddled, but honestly, in this case, how can you even expect a QA team to properly test your game when you add 10,000 different mechanics that are all barely ever used? There's weird little quirks all over this game too that I haven't even talked about because it's really not the game's main problem. For example, for some reason you retain your jump after walking off a ledge instead of jumping, and then you can just jump literally at any point during your descent. This whale at the end of stage 4 you need to jump to end the stage, and if you miss it, the game just makes you stand there for like a full minute waiting for it to return. Sometimes collision is just broken, like when this Balan hat didn't let me enter the Balan's Bout minigame. Feeding all the stupid Tims, which is a thing, by the way, I didn't even touch on that because who cares? They're basically just these creatures that you need to feed the gems that you pick up in each stage. It doesn't matter. It's not required to beat the game or anything. It's like Chow, but not fun. Anyway, they require you to stand there and feed them gems while you wait around for them to consume all of them instead of being able to just deposit them all at once. Also, the different numbered worlds aren't even in order on the hub world. There's just all these weird design choices that all lead to a very boring and frustrating experience. And frankly, polish is nowhere to be found. It's astonishing that this was actually published by Square. People are always ragging on Sonic, but honestly, I had more fun playing Sonic Forces, and I hated that game. And that's not an exaggeration, I did. And I had more fun with Sonic 06 than I had with this. Sonic 06 is a broken mess, but truthfully, that game has way more evidence of a fun game hidden inside of its bullshit than this does. And at least 06's ideas were clear and apparent, and it knew what it was trying to be. From day one, I never wanted to jump on a bandwagon or join a hive mind, but this game is not good. It's a boring, ugly mess that's trying to do a billion things at once. I'd call it a jack of all trades, master at none, but to be a jack of all trades, it would at least need to be baseline competent at the things it's trying to do, and it just isn't. And it's mostly not broken, just really boring. It just fundamentally seems to not understand why video games are fun. This isn't worth $60, and I hate myself for supporting it monetarily. Hey, thanks for watching the video. If you liked it and want to see more, there's a couple other videos right there you can check out. And if you want to see everything I upload, subscribe and then tap the bell icon, and hopefully YouTube will show you. And if you want to help support the channel, there's a Patreon right there too.